High above the clouds on a flight meant to be ordinary, silence shattered into chaos. A black woman had just closed her eyes for a short nap, unaware that within moments, every passenger's fate would hinge on her presence. The captain's voice, trembling with urgency, broke over the intercom, asking a question that froze hearts mid-beat. "Is there any fighter pilot on board?" Eyes darted, panic swelled, and whispers spread like wildfire. Why would a commercial flight need a fighter pilot? And why did fear grip the captain so tightly? No one expected what would unfold next. The woman at the center of it all was Maya Henderson, a 32-year-old aerospace engineer from Atlanta. Brilliant, disciplined, and calm under pressure, Maya had built her career designing systems for the very planes most people took for granted. But outside her professional achievements, she often carried the weight of invisibility, being overlooked, doubted, or dismissed simply because of the color of her skin. On this trip, she wasn't traveling for work or recognition. She was heading to Los Angeles for her younger brother's graduation, a rare chance to celebrate family. The flight had been uneventful at first. Passengers shuffled aboard, flight attendants made their cheerful announcements, and the steady hum of the engines lulled many into a sense of calm. Maya leaned against the window seat in row 14, finally allowing herself to rest. She wore headphones, her bag tucked neatly at her feet, and for once, she allowed the tension of her life to melt away. But fate had other plans. Halfway through the journey, turbulence rattled the plane harder than expected. The lights flickered briefly, and whispers filled the cabin. A nervous laugh here, a whispered prayer there. Maya stirred but tried to brush it off, assuming it was just another rough patch of sky. Then, minutes later, came the announcement. The captain's voice, low and unsteady, crackled through the speakers, asking if any fighter pilot was on board. The question made little sense. Fighter pilots didn't belong on commercial flights, and passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Maya blinked, disoriented, wondering if she had misheard. But the repeated call made it chillingly clear. Something was wrong. Something more dangerous than turbulence was unfolding 30,000 feet in the air. The silence that followed the captain's plea was heavier than the roar of the engines. People looked around in confusion, their faces pale, their movements uneasy. Some passengers muttered nervously, while others dismissed the announcement as some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. The captain repeated himself, his voice tight, as if the weight of the entire plane pressed down on his shoulders. "If there is any fighter pilot on board, please identify yourself immediately." Maya's heart quickened. She wasn't a fighter pilot, but her training as an aerospace engineer meant she understood aircraft in ways most could not. Yet she hesitated. Experience had taught her that stepping forward as a black woman in moments of crisis often meant being doubted, second-guessed, or ignored entirely. Her voice of reason could easily be brushed aside, especially with lives on the line. Still, something in the captain's tone suggested this was no ordinary emergency. Whispers traveled like wildfire. Some passengers speculated about a hijacking. Others feared a mechanical failure. A mother clutched her child close, whispering prayers under her breath. Then a man from the front stood up, confident, tall, and dressed in a blazer. He loudly announced that he had trained in aviation years ago, though not in combat. People immediately turned to him with relief, grateful that someone, anyone, was stepping forward. But as he made his way down the aisle toward the cockpit, Maya noticed the cracks in his words. He was vague, his experience unclear, and she knew he wasn't equipped for what was happening. The seatbelt sign remained lit, but the atmosphere inside the cabin was unraveling. Flight attendants moved quickly, trying to calm passengers while quietly conferring among themselves. A few rows back, Maya overheard a man scoff when she murmured something about possible avionics failure. "What would you know about it?" he muttered, dismissing her as if she were just another passenger offering baseless opinions. She bit her tongue, anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She wasn't surprised. She was used to it. In meetings, in classrooms, in workplaces. Her knowledge was always questioned until proven undeniable. Still, when she noticed a faint rhythmic vibration beneath her seat, a pattern that felt off from normal turbulence, her instincts screamed that the issue was not simple. Something deeper was wrong with the aircraft itself. She pressed the call button, signaling a flight attendant, but when she quietly explained her background and observations, the attendant gave her a polite but dismissive smile, assuring her the gentleman pilot, already heading to the cockpit, had things under control. That was the moment she realized her silence could cost lives. The man in the blazer disappeared behind the locked cockpit door, and minutes stretched into eternities. The plane jolted again, dropping suddenly enough to elicit screams. Overhead bins rattled, drinks spilled. A child cried out in fear. Maya tightened her grip on the armrest, her mind racing. If she didn't act, if she didn't force them to listen, the consequences could be catastrophic. But stepping forward meant more than risking embarrassment. It meant breaking through the wall of disbelief that had shadowed her for years. It meant proving, in the most dangerous circumstances, that her expertise was not just valid, but essential. And with every passing second, the danger grew closer. The cockpit door swung open. The man in the blazer stumbled back into the aisle, his face drained of confidence. His voice was shaky as he muttered something about systems failing and nothing he could do. A ripple of dread spread through the cabin. The captain's strained voice soon followed, confirming everyone's worst fears. Critical navigation controls were unresponsive, and without immediate intervention, the plane risked going down. Gasps filled the air. People clutched one another, some sobbing, others frozen in shock. The weight of mortality pressed against every passenger, suffocating the cabin. And still, no one looked toward Maya. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she forced herself to stand. The flight attendant tried to usher her back into her seat, but Maya's voice cut through the panic, steady and unyielding. She announced her qualifications, her years of designing aircraft systems, her technical expertise, her ability to understand what might be happening. Yet doubt flickered across faces. A few passengers murmured, skeptical, and one man openly scoffed. This isn't the time for guessing games. But this wasn't guessing. This was knowledge. Knowledge earned, tested, and dismissed too many times before. The captain, his voice breaking with urgency, demanded that anyone with genuine expertise step forward immediately. Silence reigned. And then, slowly, Maya pushed past the flight attendant, her determination undeniable. The captain hesitated as she approached the cockpit, glancing at her with the same doubt she had faced 1,000 times before. For a moment, Maya saw it in his eyes, the instinct to turn her away, to choose belief in a stranger's confidence over a black woman's proven skill. But desperation overrode prejudice. He let her in. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared and warning lights flashed like a storm. The plane trembled under their feet, every second closer to disaster. Maya scanned the instruments, her trained eyes locking onto the malfunction. Years of work, dismissed in boardrooms and overlooked in labs, now surged into clarity. She understood exactly what was happening and exactly what needed to be done. This was the moment her voice could no longer be ignored. Inside the cockpit, time seemed to collapse. Maya's fingers moved quickly across the panels, her voice calm but firm as she explained the steps to stabilize the aircraft. The captain, though initially hesitant, followed her lead. Each correction she called out cut through the chaos like a lifeline. Slowly, the plane began to respond, first with subtle shifts, then with undeniable stability. The violent shuddering eased, and the altitude steadied. When the realization hit, relief rippled through the cockpit. They were no longer plummeting. They were flying again. The captain, his face etched with both exhaustion and awe, looked at Maya with something she had rarely seen in situations like this: unquestionable respect. Back in the cabin, passengers whispered in disbelief as the announcement came. Thanks to swift technical intervention, the situation is now under control. There was no mention of Maya by name, but she didn't need it. She knew what had just happened. Every soul on that plane owed their lives to the expertise of a woman who had too often been doubted, overlooked, or dismissed. When they landed safely in Los Angeles, applause filled the cabin. Some passengers looked at Maya differently now, their eyes softening with gratitude, but she couldn't ignore the truth. It had taken near tragedy for them to finally see her. As she stepped off the plane, Maya carried no need for validation, only a quiet strength. She had proven herself not to them, but to herself. She had broken through the silence of invisibility, not with anger or desperation, but with knowledge that refused to be denied. Yet as the terminal swallowed the relieved crowd, a lingering question hung in the air. Why did it take the brink of disaster for her voice to matter? Racism is rarely the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it is the quietest. The doubt, the dismissal, the subtle refusal to listen until it's almost too late. Maya's story is not just about a flight saved at 30,000 feet. It is about the countless voices silenced on the ground every day. And so the question remains, how many lives, how much potential, is still being ignored simply because of who carries it?